We're still looking at the rising action that will lead to the climax in chapter 5. So in chapter 4, what we see here, basically the main event happening is the Battle of the Cowshed. Now, why does this happen? The humans spread lies about Animal Farm because they fear. You see, they fear that Animal Farm is in a good place, and that the news might spread, and they might flourish to such an extent that they will spread the spirit of rebellion around the other farms. So, what do they then do? They get together and they attack the farm. But of course, in a very, very carefully planned counterattack, the animals chase the humans off their farm. So they are repulsed, and important to notice that it was mainly Snowball's courageous actions that sort of secured their victory, and his good judgment. But the animals work together, they fight off the human beings, and they are successful in the battle of the cowshed. But this battle, of course, where Snowball played the major role, will later on, watch out for that, be misrepresented in future, after Napoleon takes control. And despite the very accurate description of the Battle of the Cowshed that we find in the book itself, it's important to notice that Napoleon's name is only mentioned once. So he was not really part of the big scheme of things. It was mainly Snowball's heroism, right? So Napoleon is mentioned only once. And what does that foreshadow again? It's a stylistic technique. It foreshadows that will be the way Napoleon, should he eventually be in control, it will be his way. In other words, he will be an opportunist, right? He will lead as a tyrant and as an opportunist. So the rising action then, after the battle, of course, the animals are overjoyed. They have beaten their common enemy, the human beings. They've driven them off the farm. And you see some spontaneous demonstrations of joy on the farm. They hoist the flag, they sing their anthem, they express their joy, so they're very, very happy. So all seems fine. Also, Snowball, he is very proud of what happened, and he makes a speech in honor of the dead sheep. He dishes out military decorations to Boxer and Snowball. Snowball and Boxer are given decorations, so there's a lot of pomp and ceremony and happiness about their victory. And then we must see how the gun, they start using the gun as a symbol for military power. Look out for that, because there's a lot about this gun, which is, of course, a motif running through the book. It becomes a symbol for military power, and they decide that the gun would be fired once a year as they commemorate the victory of the Battle of the Cowshed. And here is an overt clue to the 1917 revolution, which started on the 12th of October in 1917. So they say that every year on the 12th of October, they will fire this gun. So there's a little subtlety here. Remember how they were frightened by the gun shots of Mr. Jones right at the beginning. Now it becomes a symbol of their military power, and they accept it, and also the firing of it. So note here just this little indication that there is an allegorical connection between the Russian Revolution and the Battle of the Cowshed here. And there's yet another historical connection there, because what happened is that the USA and Britain were concerned that communist Russia would become too powerful, and they sent their troops to support anti-communists. So they were part of this whole battle of the cowshed, if you like, in allegorical terms. Now, once again, you must look at events and words and speeches. You must look at it very, very critically. Snowball is really painted as a well-meaning character. He puts everything in for the well-being of the farm and so forth. But be very careful. Look at what he says to Boxer. For instance, Boxer grieves because the stable lad was stunned during the battle, and Boxer thought that the stable lad was dead. And despite the fact that this was a common enemy, a man, he felt very sad for this poor child who got killed, according to what they thought right then. And he felt very sad, and he was grieving. And then look at Snowball's reaction to his grief. He says, "War is war. The only good human being is a dead one." Do you see the similarity? How they generalize, how they speak in absolutes. The only, right, good human being is a dead one. So there's no good living human being. So please, when you look at characters now, compare Boxer and his basic naivety and goodwill and his feelings of compassion with the suffering of the stable lad, and then Snowball's flippant generalization. War is war. Okay? His statement seems to negate, and this is important, think about it, it negates individual perception. In other words, Boxer still felt it in his heart to feel sorry for a human being who is the common enemy, right? But they wanted to negate all of that. Everything was absolute. It's us against them, right? The common enemy. So individual perception is not allowed. And these generalizations seems to negate that. It eliminates the freedom of expression. In other words, I am not allowed to say I feel sorry. No, you're not allowed to do that. So there are just inflexible rules, and the individual is subordinated to those inflexible rules. Then we also see a gradual change. Remember, we are moving towards the climax. We saw that the lives of the animals are now formalized by ceremonies and awards. Like I told you, more and more signs, instead of actual events or actual anecdotes or real live things, everything gets reduced to a sign. Here is the sign for this and a sign for that. And in the same way, as I said, the pigs do that with language. These ceremonies and awards, like the manipulative language used by the pigs, they serve as signs that actually have the power to delimit the animal's sense of meaning and purpose. They are just signs. Nothing is really personal or individual about anything. And then no individual thought also goes into any of these signs. So, for instance, when the flag with its images of the hoof and the horn is put up, when this flag is put up, it becomes a sign that commemorates the rebellion. So there's just a flag that stands for the rebellion, right? The actual rebellion, which had a lot of emotion, a lot of hard work and patriotism there, is just negated. It's a general sign of the ideals defined by Old Major as expressed in the song Beasts of England. take note of the gun, because we're going to talk about it again, that used to be one of the symbols of human oppression, as for instance used by Mr. Jones. The pigs now they adopt it, and they take that as a symbol for themselves, right? And then we are reminded, of course, of how debilitating the gunshot was that the animals heard when Mr. Jones fired that shot on the night of Old Major's speech. And then we must see how it develops into the gun, which later would be fired on Napoleon's birthday, right? And that, of course, becomes a sign that symbolizes his rule of force. So a careful rereading of chapter 5 is necessary for the next lesson, and then we are going to discuss the climax of this novel.